The stagecoach lurched through the howling white darkness, and Adelaide Evans pressed her gloved hands against the frosted window, seeing nothing but swirling snow that seemed intent on burying the world itself. She had left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago with little more than a carpetbag, her mother's Bible, and a promise from a man named Richard Colton that marriage awaited her in Wyoming Territory. The letters he had written were beautiful, filled with descriptions of endless horizons and a ranch where they would build their future together. Adelaide had believed every word, clinging to them after her father's death left her penniless and alone in a boarding house that smelled of boiled cabbage and broken dreams. At 23 years old, she had nothing left in the East except memories of a life that had crumbled like old paper. Faith had brought her this far across the continent. Faith would carry her through whatever came next. The driver shouted something she could not hear over the wind. The horses screamed, a sound that cut through even the blizzard's rage. Then the world tilted violently sideways. Adelaide found herself thrown against the coach's ceiling, then the floor, her body colliding with wood and leather as everything spun. The crash seemed to last forever and no time at all. When motion finally stopped, she lay in a heap, tasting blood where she had bitten her lip. Cold air rushed through gaps in the shattered coach. Snow already drifted through the broken door. "Driver." Her voice came out weak. She tried again, louder. "Sir, are you hurt?" No answer came. Adelaide pushed herself upright, ignoring the pain in her ribs and shoulder. The coach had tipped onto its side, and the door above her head hung open to the screaming white sky. She climbed out awkwardly, her skirts tangling around her legs, and dropped into snow that came up to her knees. The wind hit her like a physical blow. She could barely see 3 feet in any direction. The horses were gone, either broken free or taken by the storm. The driver lay motionless in the snow 20 feet away, his neck bent at an angle that told Adelaide everything she needed to know. She had seen death before when her father passed, and she recognized its stillness now. She should go to him anyway. Check for certain. Say a prayer. But her fingers were already numb inside her gloves, and the wind was stealing the breath from her lungs. Adelaide made her way back to the overturned coach and pulled her carpetbag from inside, along with the wool blanket from the seat. The driver's canteen hung from a hook. She took that too, guilt mixing with the survival instinct that pushed her forward. There was no road visible, no tracks. Nothing but white emptiness in every direction. Adelaide wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and started walking. She had no idea which direction to go, so she turned her back to the worst of the wind and moved forward because stopping meant dying. Faith, she told herself. She still had her faith. God would not have brought her this far only to let her freeze in a Wyoming blizzard. Richard would be waiting for her in Concord. The town was supposed to be close to the stage road. She just needed to keep moving. Time lost meaning. Adelaide walked through a white void where sky and ground merged into a single screaming entity. Her feet went numb first, then her legs. She fell twice, forced herself back up both times. The Bible in her bag pressed against her hip with each step, a small weight that reminded her of her mother's voice reading Psalms by candlelight. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The third time she fell, Adelaide was not sure she could rise again. The snow beneath her felt almost warm. She knew that was dangerous, remembered reading something about freezing, but the memory seemed distant and unimportant. Maybe she could rest here just a moment, close her eyes briefly. "Madam," the voice cut through the wind. "Madam, can you hear me?" Adelaide opened her eyes. A face looked down at her, half obscured by a scarf and a hat crusted with ice. She tried to speak, but her lips would not work properly. "I got you." Strong arms lifted her from the snow. "Stay with me now. My place is just ahead. She wanted to ask his name, wanted to thank him, but darkness pulled at the edges of her vision. Adelaide felt herself pressed against a broad chest, felt the rhythmic motion of walking, and then felt nothing at all. Warmth woke her. Adelaide surfaced slowly from unconsciousness, aware first of heat against her skin, then of softness beneath her, then of the crackle and pop of a fire. Her eyes opened to wooden beams overhead and walls made of rough-hewn logs. An oil lamp hung from a hook, casting golden light across a small room that was sparse but clean. She lay in a narrow bed covered with quilts and furs, and when she tried to move, her body screamed in protest. Easy now. The voice belonged to the man who had pulled her from the snow. He sat in a chair near the fire, rising as she stirred. In the lamplight, Adelaide could see him properly for the first time. He was tall, with broad shoulders beneath a worn flannel shirt. His face was weathered by sun and wind, strong-featured, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked to be perhaps 28 or 30. "You have been out for near about 6 hours. Had me worried there for a spell." "Where am I?" Adelaide's voice rasped. Her throat felt like she had swallowed sand. "My homestead, about 8 miles north of Concord." He moved to a small table and poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "Name is Vincent Lawson. Found you collapsed in the snow about a quarter mile from here. Miracle I spotted you at all in that whiteout." He brought the cup to her, helping her sit up enough to drink. The water was cool and sweet. Adelaide drank greedily, then coughed, and he pulled the cup back gently. "Slow," he said. "Little sips." "The driver," Adelaide managed. "He was killed when the coach overturned. I will go look for him when the storm breaks. Right now, nothing can be done. This blizzard is one of the worst I have seen in 5 years here." Vincent returned to his chair. "What were you doing on a stage in this weather, coming to Concord?" "I am supposed to meet someone there. A man named Richard Colton. We are to be married." The words felt strange in her mouth, like a story she had once heard about someone else. Something flickered across Vincent's face, too quick for her to read. "Richard Colton. You know him." "I know him." Vincent stood abruptly and walked to the fire, adding another log though it needed none. His back was to her, shoulders tense. "How long since you heard from him?" "His last letter arrived 6 weeks ago. He apologized for the delay in writing, said he had been busy with the ranch." "Why?" "Is something wrong?" Vincent turned to face her. His expression was carefully neutral in a way that immediately frightened Adelaide. "Madam, what is your name?" "Adelaide Evans." "Miss Evans, I am sorry to be the one to tell you this, but Richard Colton died 2 months ago. Kicked in the head by a horse. He is buried in the churchyard in Concord." The words did not make sense at first. Adelaide stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence. The part that would explain this was a misunderstanding. When Vincent simply looked back at her with something like pity in his gray eyes, the reality crashed over her like a wave. "No," she whispered. "No, that cannot be right. He wrote to me 6 weeks ago." Someone might have mailed a letter he had already written. Or perhaps it was delayed in the post. "But Richard has been dead since early October. I was at his funeral myself." Adelaide felt the walls closing in around her. She had given up everything to come here, spent her last money on the stage fare. She knew no one in Wyoming Territory. Had nothing except the clothes in her carpet bag and a promise that had died before she ever arrived. "I see." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "I see. Well, thank you for telling me, Mr. Lawson, Miss Evans. I would like to rest now if you do not mind." Adelaide lay back down, turning her face toward the wall. She kept her eyes open, staring at the rough logs, feeling hollowed out and empty. Behind her, she heard Vincent move around the cabin quietly, giving her privacy in the only way he could. The blizzard raged for 2 more days. Adelaide recovered slowly, her body healing from frostbite and bruising while her spirit remained numb. Vincent was unfailingly courteous, sleeping on the floor near the fire while she kept the bed, cooking simple meals of salt pork and beans and biscuits. He spoke little, seeming to understand she needed silence. On the third morning, Adelaide woke to sunlight streaming through the single window. The wind had finally stopped. She rose from bed, finding her legs steady beneath her for the first time since the accident, and looked out at a world transformed. Snow lay in pristine drifts across endless white prairie. The sky arched overhead in brilliant blue, and the air that came through gaps in the window frame was cold but still. Vincent was outside already. She could see him near a small barn, tending to horses. Two of them, sturdy-looking animals with shaggy winter coats. As she watched, he paused in his work and looked toward the horizon, his breath pluming white in the frigid air. Adelaide turned from the window and found her carpetbag. Her clothes had been dried and folded neatly on a chair. She changed out of the nightshirt Vincent had loaned her, struggling with buttons that still seemed too small for her clumsy fingers. When she finally managed to dress herself, she opened her bag to take inventory of what she owned in the world. 3 dresses, 2 petticoats, 4 sets of undergarments, 1 pair of spare shoes, her mother's Bible, a small sewing kit, and the packet of letters from Richard Colton. Adelaide pulled out the letters and sat on the edge of the bed, reading through them again. They were kind letters, thoughtful, full of plans for a future that would never come. He had seemed like a good man. She felt genuine sorrow for his death, even though she had never met him, even though the promises he had made her were now just ink on paper. The cabin door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Vincent stamping snow from his boots. He pulled off his hat and coat, hanging both on pegs by the door, then saw her sitting there with the letters. "Storm has broken," he said. "I will ride into town today, report about the stage driver. There will be arrangements to make." "I understand. Thank you." Adelaide folded the letters carefully and placed them back in her bag. "I suppose I should come with you. I will need to find some sort of employment in Concord." Vincent crossed to the stove and poured coffee from the pot that sat there. "What kind of work were you thinking?" "I can sew. I worked as a seamstress in Philadelphia before my father died. Perhaps there is need for that sort of thing." She tried to sound hopeful, but the words fell flat. She knew nothing about Concord or what opportunities it might offer a woman alone. "The town is small, maybe 300 people. I do not know if there is enough sewing work to support you." Vincent brought her a cup of coffee. "But Molly Sanders runs a boarding house. She might have room." "I see." Adelaide wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for its heat. "I have some money. Not much, but enough for a few weeks if I am careful." They rode into Concord that afternoon, Adelaide sitting behind Vincent on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. The ride took 2 hours through snow that came up to the horse's knees in places. Vincent knew where he was going, though, following landmarks Adelaide could not see, and eventually buildings appeared on the horizon. Concord was indeed small, just a single main street with buildings clustered along it like children huddling for warmth. A general store, a saloon, a church with a white steeple, a blacksmith's forge, a few other structures Adelaide could not identify from a distance. People were out digging paths through the snow, and they looked up as Vincent rode past, calling greetings that he returned with nods or brief waves. He stopped first at a building with a sign reading "Sheriff" hanging above the door. A man emerged before they could dismount, tall and lean with a badge pinned to his coat. "Vincent, glad to see you made it through the storm all right." "Sheriff Peters, we have a problem. Stage from Laramie went over in the blizzard 3 days back. Driver is dead. somewhere along the route. I will take you to where I found Miss Evans here. We should be able to locate the coach and the body from there. The sheriff's expression grew somber. That would be Tom Henley driving that route. Good man, has a wife in Laramie. He looked up at Adelaide, his eyes kind. You are fortunate, miss. Not many would have survived that storm on foot. Mr. Lawson saved my life, Adelaide said quietly. That sounds like Vincent. The sheriff glanced back at him. Give me an hour to get a wagon ready and we will head out. Can you stay in town that long? I have business here anyway. Vincent dismounted, then helped Adelaide down. Her legs trembled when her feet hit the ground and his hands steadied her until she found her balance. Come on, Miss Evans. Let us see about that room. Molly Sanders' boarding house was a 2-story structure painted cheerful yellow, or at least it had been before weather had faded it to pale cream. The woman who answered their knock was short and round, with gray hair pinned in a bun and a face that looked like it smiled often. Vincent Lawson, as I live and breathe, have not seen you in town for near about a month. She beamed at him, then noticed Adelaide. And who is this poor frozen child, Miss Adelaide Evans from Philadelphia? She needs a room, Molly. Can you help her? Molly's expression shifted to concern and welcome in equal measure. Of course. Come in out of the cold, dear. You look half-starved. Vincent, you bring her right into the kitchen. I have stew on. The boarding house was warm and smelled of cooking food and lemon oil. Molly bustled them into a kitchen where a pot indeed bubbled on the stove, and within minutes, Adelaide found herself seated at a scarred wooden table with a bowl of beef stew and fresh bread in front of her. The food was hot and savory, better than anything she had eaten in weeks of travel. Molly sat across from her while Vincent leaned against the door frame, and Adelaide explained her circumstances in brief terms. She had come to marry Richard Colton. He had died before she arrived. She needed a place to stay and work if she could find it. That poor man, Molly said, shaking her head. Such a terrible accident. He was a good soul, Richard was. Had a hard time of it these last years after his wife passed, but he was trying to build something good again. She patted Adelaide's hand. I am sorry your journey ended this way, dear. But we will figure something out. The room is yours for as long as you need it. $2 a week, meals included. Thank you. Adelaide felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough these past days. I will pay you for the first week now. We can settle accounts later. You eat and get your strength back. Molly rose and began cutting more bread, clearly determined to feed Adelaide back to health immediately. Vincent pushed off from the door frame. I need to get back to Sheriff Peters. Miss Evans, you will be all right here. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Lawson, for everything. He nodded, settled his hat back on his head, and left without further word. Adelaide watched him go, feeling strangely bereft, which was ridiculous. She barely knew the man. He had done his Christian duty by rescuing her and seeing her safely to town. She could not expect more. That Vincent is a good man, Molly said, as if reading her thoughts. Keeps to himself mostly, but he has a kind heart under that quiet exterior. Works his homestead alone, which is hard in this country. Lost his whole family to cholera when he was just 19. Came west to escape the grief, I think. That was near about 10 years ago now. Adelaide absorbed this information, adding it to her understanding of the man who had saved her life. He seems very capable. Oh, he is that. Best horseman in the county, and he knows this land like the back of his hand. If Vincent had not been out checking his fences when that storm hit, well. Molly did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The first week in Concord passed in a blur of adjustment. Adelaide took a small room on the second floor of the boarding house, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the main street. She explored the town, finding it even smaller than she had first thought. The general store was run by a Chinese couple, the Chens, who spoke English with heavy accents and treated her with careful politeness. The church was Methodist, presided over by a young preacher named Samuel Wright, who welcomed her warmly and invited her to Sunday services. Adelaide looked for work. She visited every business, asked every person Molly suggested. There was no need for a seamstress. Mrs. Harrison did alterations out of her home and saw to the town's needs adequately. The saloon keeper laughed when she inquired there, not unkindly, but made it clear that was no place for a woman like her. The general store had no openings. By the end of the week, Adelaide's small store of money had dwindled alarmingly. She paid Molly for her second week and counted what remained. $3 and some change. Maybe enough for one more week after this if she was very careful. Sunday morning she attended church, sitting in a back pew and listening to Reverend Wright preach about faith and perseverance. The message felt pointed, though she knew it could not be. Afterward, several townspeople introduced themselves. They were friendly enough, curious about the newcomer, but Adelaide could see pity in their eyes. The stranger who came all this way for a man already dead. Poor thing. She was standing outside the church, preparing herself for the walk back to the boarding house, when a horse and rider approached. Vincent dismounted and tied his horse to the rail, then walked toward the church entrance. He had cleaned up for Sunday services, his hair trimmed neatly, wearing a dark suit coat that had seen better days but was brushed and mended with care. He saw her and stopped. "Miss Evans." "Mr. Lawson, I did not expect to see you here. I make it to services when I can. Weather has been clear this week." He shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Have you found work yet?" "No." Adelaide tried to keep the discouragement from her voice. "It seems Concord is well supplied with labor." Vincent nodded slowly, looking out at the snowy street. "I have been thinking on something. My homestead is 8 miles out, like I said. Hard to work alone, especially in winter. I could use help with cooking and general housekeeping. Would not be much, but I could offer room and board plus $3 a week. It is honest work and proper. You would have your own space." Adelaide stared at him, trying to process this offer. "You are suggesting I come work as your housekeeper, if you are willing. I know it is not what you planned for your life, but it would give you security while you figure out what comes next." Vincent looked directly at her, his gray eyes serious. "I am offering respectfully, Miss Evans. Nothing improper. I need help and you need work. Seemed like it might suit us both. It would mean leaving town, living in isolation with a man she barely knew. It would also mean regular pay, food, shelter, and time to consider her options without panic." Adelaide thought of her dwindling money, of the dead ends she had met all week, of the long winter ahead. "I would want to attend church when weather permits," she said slowly. "I could bring you in for services. And I would want to know I could leave if the arrangement does not work. Fair enough. Same goes for me, though I would give you proper notice." Adelaide took a breath. "Then yes, Mr. Lawson, I accept your offer. When would you want me to start?" "Tomorrow, if that suits you. I will come fetch you in the morning." They shook hands on it there in front of the church, his grip firm and warm, and Adelaide tried to quiet the voice in her head that said she was making a mistake. What choice did she have? This was survival. She would be practical, work hard, save her money, and eventually find a better path forward. It was only temporary. That evening, she packed her carpetbag again and explained the situation to Molly, who looked worried but understanding. "You will be all right out there," Molly said, though she did not sound entirely convinced. "Vincent will treat you proper. But you come back to town if you need to, you hear. Any time, any reason. This room will be here." "Thank you, Molly. You have been very kind to me." The older woman hugged her, smelling of cinnamon and soap. "You are a good girl, Adelaide. Life has dealt you a hard hand, but you are strong. I can see it. You will land on your feet." Adelaide hoped she was right. Vincent arrived mid-morning as promised, driving a wagon this time instead of riding horseback. He loaded her single bag into the back, helped her up onto the seat, and they set off into the brilliant cold day. The sky was that intense blue that only came with winter, and their breath plumed white in the air. Snow crunched under the wagon wheels. They rode in silence for the first mile. Then Vincent said, "I should tell you more about the place so you know what you are getting into. It is a homestead claim, 160 acres. I have been working it for 5 years now. Built the cabin myself, along with the barn and a few outbuildings. I run about 30 head of cattle and keep a few chickens. In summer, I grow vegetables. In winter, mainly, I try to keep everything alive until spring." "It sounds like hard work," Adelaide said. "It is, but it is mine. Every board and nail, every fence post, I put it there with my own hands. That means something." There was pride in his voice, quiet but unmistakable. "Why homestead alone? Forgive me for asking, but Molly mentioned you lost your family. Did you never want to marry, have a family of your own?" Vincent was quiet for long enough that Adelaide thought she had overstepped. Then he said, "I was engaged once, back in Illinois before my family died. Girl named Catherine. She decided she did not want to come west with me, chose to marry a shopkeeper instead. That was the right choice for her, and I hold no grudge, but it taught me that this life is not for everyone. I figured I would build something first, prove I could make a go of it before I thought about asking someone to share it. And have you? Proven you can make a go of it. I am still here. That counts for something." He glanced at her. "What about you, Miss Evans? What was your life like back east?" Adelaide told him as they traveled, the words coming easier than she expected. She described her childhood in Philadelphia, her father's work as a bookkeeper, her mother's death when Adelaide was 15. How she had learned sewing to help support them, sitting up late by lamplight doing piecework for a dressmaker. How her father had been so proud when she got a position in a proper shop, sewing fine clothes for wealthy women. Then his sudden illness, the bills piling up, his death leaving her with nothing but debts. "Richard's letters seemed like an answer to prayer," she said quietly. "A chance to start fresh, to build a life with someone kind. I convinced myself I could love him given time. Maybe I could have." She looked down at her gloved hands. "Now I suppose I will never know. I am sorry it happened the way it did. You deserved better. My mother used to say that God's plans are not always clear to us in the moment, that we have to have faith we are where we are meant to be." Adelaide smiled without humor. "I am trying to hold on to that. Faith is important," Vincent said, "but so is action. Sounds like you have both." The homestead appeared gradually, materializing from the white landscape. First the barn, solid and well built, then the cabin she remembered, then other structures. A chicken coop, a smokehouse, a small shed. Everything showed signs of careful maintenance. Fences were straight and strong. Wood was stacked neatly under cover. This was a place someone cared for. Vincent helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag inside. The cabin looked exactly as she remembered, except he had added a curtain across one corner near the fireplace. Behind it, Adelaide could see a narrow cot. "That is where I will sleep," Vincent said, following her gaze. "You take the bed. The curtain gives us both privacy." "I cannot take your bed, Mr. Lawson. You are working for me, not the other way around. The bed is part of your wages." His tone was firm, brooking no argument. "Now let me show you how things work around here." He took her through the cabin, showing her where supplies were kept, how the stove worked, where to find clean water. He was organized, everything in its place, but the cabin clearly lacked a woman's touch. There were no curtains on the window, no decorations, nothing soft or welcoming. It was purely functional space. Outside, Vincent showed her the barn where 2 horses, a milk cow and his riding horse, were stabled. The chickens lived in their coop, 5 hens who regarded Adelaide with suspicious eyes. Eggs need collecting twice a day, Vincent explained. The cow needs milking morning and evening. I usually handle that, but you should know how in case I am away from the place. I have never milked a cow, Adelaide admitted. I will teach you. Vincent moved through the barn with easy confidence, checking on each animal, pointing out where feed was stored. Most of what you do will be inside work, cooking, cleaning, mending, but it helps to know the whole operation. They worked together that first day establishing routines. Adelaide prepared dinner while Vincent did evening chores, making a simple meal of fried potatoes and bacon. They ate at the small table, the silence between them more comfortable than she expected. After dinner, Vincent sat by the fire working on a piece of leather harness that needed mending while Adelaide unpacked her few belongings. When full dark came, Vincent banked the fire and retired behind his curtain. Adelaide changed into her nightdress with her back to the curtain, hyper-aware of every sound, but Vincent made no noise. She climbed into the bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, and stared at the dying firelight flickering on the ceiling beams. This was her life now. Housekeeper to a taciturn cowboy on a remote homestead in Wyoming Territory. It was so far from what she had imagined for herself that it almost felt like someone else's life entirely. Yet here she was, and she would make the best of it. What other choice did she have? Days fell into rhythm. Adelaide woke before dawn to restart the fire and start breakfast. Vincent would come in from morning chores to find coffee ready and food on the table. After breakfast, he would head out to work on whatever the day required while Adelaide cleaned the cabin, prepared the midday meal, mended clothes, did whatever tasks needed doing. Afternoons, she spent learning the other skills Vincent thought she should have. How to milk the cow, how to collect eggs without getting pecked, how to recognize signs that a storm was coming. He was a patient teacher, never mocking her city ignorance, showing her things as many times as necessary until she understood. In return, Adelaide brought order to the cabin. She made curtains from spare flour sacking, whitened with lye and hemmed neatly. She organized the shelves, cleaned corners that had not been attended to in years, cooked meals more varied than what Vincent had been eating. "This is good," he said one evening over stew she had made with dried beef and vegetables from his root cellar. "Really good." "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother. She said a woman should know how to make something fine out of very little. We did not have much when I was growing up." Adelaide smiled at the memory. She could take the cheapest cuts of meat and make them taste like they came from a rich man's table. "My mother was like that too," Vincent said quietly, always singing while she cooked. The house smelled like bread and happiness. It was the most personal thing he had shared since that first wagon ride. Adelaide looked at him across the table, seeing past the weathered exterior to the man beneath. He was lonely, she realized. For all his competence and self-sufficiency, Vincent Lawson was profoundly lonely. "Tell me about them," she said gently. "Your family." Vincent was quiet for so long she thought he would refuse. Then he began to speak, haltingly at first, then with more ease. He told her about his parents, his 2 younger sisters, the small farm in Illinois where he had grown up. How cholera had swept through their county like wildfire, taking people by the dozens. How he had been away buying supplies when it hit his family, returning to find all 4 of them dead within days of each other. "I buried them all in one day," he said, staring into his coffee cup. Could not even get the preacher to come. He was dealing with too many other families. I spoke words over their graves from my mother's Bible, but I do not even remember what I said. Then I sold everything, took the money, and came west. Thought maybe if I went far enough, it would not hurt so much. Does it still hurt? Adelaide asked softly. Every day, but different now. More like an old wound that aches when weather changes instead of a fresh cut. I understand. I feel that way about my parents. Their eyes met across the table and something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. The shared knowledge of grief and survival. Adelaide felt her heart shift, some locked door inside her cracking open just slightly. The days grew shorter as December deepened. Snow fell frequently, sometimes gentle flurries, sometimes raging storms that kept Vincent close to the homestead. On those storm days, they worked together inside the cabin, Adelaide sewing while Vincent carved or repaired tools. They talked more as time passed, sharing stories of their pasts, their thoughts about the books Adelaide had read or the places Vincent hoped to see someday. "Have you ever been to California?" Adelaide asked one afternoon while hemming a shirt. "No. Always wanted to see the ocean, though. They say it goes on forever, just water to the horizon. Hard to imagine when you grow up surrounded by cornfields." Vincent was working on a piece of wood, carving it into something Adelaide could not quite identify yet. "What about you? Any place you dreamed of seeing?" "Boston. My mother grew up there and always talked about it. The harbor, the old buildings, the history. She made it sound magical." Adelaide knotted her thread and bit it off. "Seems silly now. I crossed half the country to get here, and I never even made it to Boston, which was just a few hours north." "Not silly. Dreams are important, even the ones we do not reach." "You still have dreams, Mr. Lawson." He looked up from his carving. "A few. And I think after living in the same cabin for near about a month now, you can call me Vincent." Adelaide felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That would not be proper. Nothing about this situation is entirely proper by Eastern standards, but we both know it is respectable. My name is Vincent. I would like to hear you use it." "Very well, Vincent." The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. "Then you should call me Adelaide." "Adelaide," he repeated, and the way he said it, careful and warm, made something flutter in her chest. Christmas approached. Adelaide had no money for gifts, but she used scraps of fabric to make a new shirt for Vincent, cutting and sewing in secret while he was outside working. She embroidered his initials small on the collar, her stitches precise and even. It was practical and personal all at once. Vincent rode into town 3 days before Christmas and returned with supplies including, to Adelaide's surprise, a small ham, sugar, dried fruit, and cinnamon. "Thought we should have a proper Christmas dinner," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "If you are willing to cook it, that is." "Of course." Adelaide was touched by the gesture. "It will be lovely." Christmas morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. Adelaide woke to find Vincent had already been up for hours. He had cut a small pine tree and brought it inside, setting it up in the corner. It was not decorated, but it brought the smell of evergreen into the cabin, fresh and clean. "Merry Christmas," Vincent said when he saw her emerge. "I know it is not much, but I thought—" "It is perfect," Adelaide interrupted. "Thank you." They exchanged gifts after breakfast. Adelaide presented the shirt, watching nervously as Vincent unfolded it. He ran his fingers over the embroidery, then looked at her with something bright and wondering in his gray eyes. "This is fine work, Adelaide, real fine. Thank you. It is just a shirt." "It is more than that." He disappeared behind his curtain for a moment and returned with a package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you." Adelaide opened it carefully. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, the cover tooled with an intricate pattern of flowers and vines, and a good pen. She stared at it, overwhelmed. "I noticed you like to read," Vincent said. "Thought maybe you would like to write too. Put down your thoughts or stories or whatever you want. The leather work is mine. Did it in the evenings while you were sleeping." "Vincent, this is beautiful. This must have taken hours. Had the time, wanted to make something you would actually use." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Do you like it?" "I love it." Adelaide hugged the journal to her chest. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has given me in years." "Thank you." They spent Christmas Day in companionable peace. Adelaide cooked the ham with careful attention, making it last for their dinner along with biscuits, gravy, and dried apple pie sweetened with the sugar Vincent had bought. It was a feast by homestead standards. They ate slowly, savoring every bite, and afterward sat by the fire while Adelaide read aloud from her mother's Bible. The Christmas story, familiar and comforting. When she finished, Vincent was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just thinking how different this Christmas is from last year. Spent that one alone, ate beans from a can, went to bed early because there was nothing else to do." He smiled slightly. "This is better. It is better than mine last year too. My father had just died. I was living in a boarding house that was freezing cold, and the landlady served boiled chicken that tasted like shoe leather." Adelaide smiled back. "We are fortunate in our way." "I suppose we are." The moment stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Adelaide felt it like a physical presence, this growing connection that had been building since she arrived. She saw it in the way Vincent looked at her sometimes, quickly glancing away when she caught him. Felt it in the way her heart sped up when he came through the door each evening. They were becoming more than employer and employee, more than two people sharing space out of necessity. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. January brought brutal cold and more snow. Vincent worked hard, keeping paths clear and animals fed. Adelaide watched him return each evening exhausted, his face raw from windburn and worried. This was such a harsh land. How did anyone survive it? But Vincent seemed to thrive despite the hardship. He moved through winter routines with steady competence, never complaining, always finding something to appreciate. An especially beautiful sunrise. The way ice formed patterns on the window glass. Small pleasures in the midst of difficulty. Adelaide found herself drawn to that quality in him. Vincent saw beauty where others might see only bleakness. He found satisfaction in honest work. He was kind without being soft, strong without being harsh. More and more, she caught herself watching him, noticing details. The way his hair curled at his collar. How his hands moved, capable and sure, whether he was mending tack or adding wood to the fire. The rare smile that transformed his weathered face. She was falling in love with him. The realization came quietly one evening in mid-January as she watched him read from an old newspaper, his profile lit by firelight. Adelaide set down her sewing, her hands going still, as the truth washed over her. She loved Vincent Lawson, loved his steadiness and his solitude, loved the way he had saved her life and then given her purpose, loved how he made her feel safe in this wild place. It was nothing like what she had expected to feel for Richard Colton, that practical affection built on letters and plans. This was deeper, rooted in daily life and growing respect and genuine care. The problem was she had no idea how Vincent felt about her. He was unfailingly respectful, keeping appropriate distance, never saying or doing anything that crossed the line between employer and employee. Maybe that was all she would ever be to him. The woman who cooked his meals and kept his house tidy. A useful arrangement, nothing more. The thought was painful enough to make her chest ache. February brought a brief thaw. Vincent rode into town for supplies, offering to take Adelaide along so she could attend Sunday services. She accepted eagerly, hungry for the company of other people, for the break-in routine. Concord looked different after her weeks away. Smaller somehow, but welcoming. People greeted her warmly at church, asking how she was, expressing pleasure that she looked well. Molly hugged her tightly afterward. "Look at you with color in your cheeks and meat on your bones. That homestead life agrees with you, honey." "It is not what I expected, but it is all right," Adelaide said. "Vincent is a good employer." "Is he now?" Molly's eyes were too knowing. "And how are you two getting along out there all alone?" "Respectfully," Adelaide said firmly. "He is a perfect gentleman." "That is good. Though a little less perfect might not be terrible if you take my meaning." Molly winked, and Adelaide felt herself blush. "You could do far worse than Vincent Lawson, is all I am saying. He is a good man with a good future ahead of him. And unless I miss my guess, the way he looks at you is not how a man looks at his housekeeper." "You are imagining things." "Am I? We will see." Molly patted her arm. "Just do not let pride or fear make you blind to what might be right in front of you." On the ride back to the homestead, Adelaide thought about Molly's words. Did Vincent look at her differently? She had been so careful not to presume, not to read too much into small kindnesses, that maybe she had missed something. "Thank you for bringing me to town," she said as the cabin came into view. "It was good to see everyone. We can make it a regular thing if you like, every other Sunday perhaps, weather allowing." "I would like that very much." Vincent pulled the wagon up to the cabin and helped Adelaide down. His hands lingered at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary, and when she looked up, she found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Adelaide, He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. Then he released her and stepped back. "I am glad you had a good time." Whatever he had been about to say remained unspoken. Adelaide wanted to ask, to push past his reticence, but courage failed her. Instead, she simply nodded and went inside. March arrived with the first hints of spring. Snow still covered the ground, but the quality of light changed, and the cold lost some of its bitter edge. Vincent began talking about plans for planting season, when he would plow and what crops to try this year. Adelaide listened, noting how animated he became when discussing the land and its possibilities. He truly loved this place, she realized. It was not just survival for him. It was a passion. One evening after dinner, Vincent cleared his throat in the way he did when he had something difficult to say. "I have been thinking, your wages, $3 a week is not enough for all you do around here. I should raise it to $5. "That is very generous, but not necessary. We agreed on $3. "Adelaide, you do more than cook and clean. You take care of the chickens, help with the cow, mend everything I own, keep this place running smooth as clockwork. You are worth more than I am paying you." He leaned forward, earnest. "Please, let me pay you fairly." She could see this mattered to him, this fairness. "All right." "Thank you, Vincent. There is something else." He stood, paced to the window and back, clearly agitated. "I need to say this right, but I am not good with words, not like you are, all educated and able to express yourself proper." Adelaide's heart began to pound. "Just say what you mean to say." Vincent stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You came here with nothing. Lost everything you had worked for, everything you hoped for. I know what that feels like. When I lost my family, I wanted to disappear, stop existing. Coming west was supposed to fix that, but for years I was just going through motions. Working because I had to, building because there was nothing else to do. Then you arrived in that blizzard and everything changed. Vincent, let me finish before I lose my nerve." He took a breath. "These months with you have been the best I have known since before my family died. You make this cabin a home. You make every day better just by being in it. I look forward to coming inside at the end of the day because you are here. I think about you when I am out working. I worry about whether you are warm enough, whether you are happy, whether you might ever feel about me even a fraction of what I have come to feel about you." Adelaide stood, her legs trembling. "What do you feel about me? I love you." The words came out quiet but rock solid. "I am in love with you, Adelaide Evans. Have been for weeks now, maybe months. And I know this was not what you came here for. I know you planned a different life with a different man. But I am asking you to consider something new, not as my housekeeper, as my wife. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to build a life with you, a real partnership. I want to see you smile every morning for the rest of my life. And I will do everything in my power to make you happy if you give me the chance." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears. "I came to Wyoming with my faith so shaken I could barely pray. Everything I believed about my future, about God's plan, was torn away. I was so angry, Vincent. Angry at God for taking my parents, angry at fate for stealing Richard before I ever met him, angry at myself for being foolish enough to hope. I had stopped believing that good things could happen to me. And now," his voice was barely a whisper, "now I think maybe I was supposed to arrive in that blizzard. Maybe I was supposed to lose everything so I could find you." She reached up, touching his face with her fingertips. "I love you too, Vincent. So much it frightens me sometimes. You showed me that faith is not just believing in what you cannot see, but trusting that even when everything seems lost, there is still hope. You restored my belief in love." Vincent caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. "Is that a yes? Will you marry me?" "Yes," Adelaide said, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. Adelaide wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing close, feeling his heart hammer against her chest. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and tentative and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I will do this right," Vincent said. "We will get married in the church with the whole town as witness. I want you to have a proper wedding, not some rushed thing that looks like we have something to hide. I do not need anything fancy. Maybe not, but I want to give it to you anyway." He rested his forehead against hers. "I want everyone to know you chose me, that we chose each other." They married on the 1st of April, early enough in spring that snow still lingered in shaded places, but late enough that the day dawned clear and mild. Adelaide wore a dress that Molly helped her make, pale blue cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs. It was simple but pretty, and when Vincent saw her walking down the aisle of the small church, his expression made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony was brief. Reverend Wright reading from his prayer book while the assembled townspeople watched with approving smiles. Adelaide spoke her vows in a clear voice, Vincent's hand warm and steady in hers. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed her softly, and someone in the back pew cheered. Afterward, there was a celebration at Molly's boarding house. The whole town turned out, bringing food and well wishes. People danced to music from a fiddle and concertina, the small parlor packed with bodies and laughter. Vincent danced with Adelaide, holding her close despite his clear discomfort with so many people. "I am not used to this," he murmured in her ear. "Being social, you are doing fine." Adelaide smiled up at him. "Just a few more hours, then we can go home." "Home," Vincent repeated. "I like how that sounds when you say it." They left as the sun was setting, riding back to the homestead in the wagon with good wishes and laughter following them into the distance. Adelaide leaned against Vincent's shoulder, content and happy in a way she had not been since before her father's death. This was right. This was where she was meant to be, At the homestead, Vincent carried her across the threshold, making her laugh. He set her down gently in the middle of the cabin, then took both her hands. "I know we have been living here together for months," he said, "but this is different now. You are my wife. This is our home, and I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy." "You already do," Adelaide said. She reached up to remove his hat, then hers, setting them aside. "Now kiss me, husband," he did, and this kiss was different from those before. Deeper. More urgent. The restraint they had both maintained for months finally released. Adelaide responded eagerly, her hands tangling in his hair, feeling his arms tighten around her waist. When Vincent lifted her and carried her to the bed that was now truly theirs to share, she went willingly, joyfully, ready to begin this new chapter of their life together. Spring turned the prairie green. Adelaide helped Vincent plant a garden, her hands learning the feel of soil and seed. They worked side by side, her skirts pinned up and her sleeves rolled high, planting rows of potatoes and beans and squash. The cattle grew fat on new grass. The chickens produced eggs in abundance. In May, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a week or two, but waited to be certain before telling Vincent. She chose a quiet evening after dinner when he sat reading by the window in the long twilight. "Vincent, I have news." He looked up immediately, always attentive to her tone. "What is it?" "We are going to have a child. Next winter, probably January." For a moment Vincent simply stared at her, stunned into silence. Then joy spread across his face like sunrise, brilliant and complete. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, careful even in his excitement. "Adelaide, a baby." He sounded awed. "We are going to have a family. Are you happy?" She knew he was, could see it in his face, but needed to hear the words. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am overwhelmed, grateful, terrified." Vincent laughed, pulling back to look at her. "I have no idea how to be a father. I have no idea how to be a mother. We will learn together." Adelaide took his hand and placed it on her still, flat belly. "We will teach them to be strong and kind like you. We will give them everything we wished we had. We will build something good here, Vincent. I know it. With you, I believe anything is possible." Summer was a time of growth and hard work. The garden flourished under Adelaide's care, and she learned to preserve food for winter, putting up jars of vegetables and fruit purchased from passing traders. Her belly swelled gradually, and Vincent became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested when he insisted on hauling water for her. "I know, but humor me. I want you and the baby safe. We are safe, we have you." In August, Vincent rode into town and returned with lumber stacked in the wagon. He began building an addition to the cabin, a second room where the baby would sleep when older, where their family could expand. Adelaide watched him work in the evenings after his regular chores were done, saw the care he took with every board and nail. He was building their future with his own hands, just as he had promised. One evening she brought him water while he worked. The summer heat was fierce and sweat ran down his face. Vincent drank gratefully, then pulled her close, careful of her rounded belly. "I keep thinking about how we met," he said. "You appearing out of that blizzard like a ghost. I almost did not go out that day. The storm was so bad and I thought nothing could be alive in it. But something told me to check the fences anyway, if I had not. But you did." Adelaide put her hand over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady. "You found me and you saved me, and now we are here. That was not accident, Vincent. That was grace. I used to think I was being punished, losing my family, being sent out here alone, but maybe I was being guided. Maybe I had to go through all that darkness to find you in the storm." He kissed the top of her head. You were worth waiting for, Adelaide Lawson, and you were worth finding. Autumn came with cool nights and golden days. They harvested the garden, pulling up potatoes and onions, cutting down dried bean plants. Vincent butchered one of the steers, and Adelaide helped him smoke and preserve the meat. Their root cellar filled with food, preparation for the winter ahead. In October, Adelaide felt the baby move for the first time. She was sitting at the table shelling beans when a flutter in her belly made her gasp. Vincent was across the room, mending tack, and immediately looked up in alarm. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. The baby moved. Here." She grabbed his hand and pressed it to her stomach. They waited breathlessly, and then it came again, a small push against Vincent's palm. His face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, wonder, and finally, joy so pure it brought tears to Adelaide's eyes. "That is our child," he whispered. "Really in there, alive and moving." "Our child," Adelaide agreed. "Are you hoping for a boy or girl? I do not care as long as they are healthy. And they have your eyes. I hope they have your eyes. I hope they have your steadiness, your good heart." They sat there together, Vincent's hand on her belly, feeling their baby move and dreaming of the future. Winter returned with force in early November. Adelaide was enormous now, her belly so large she could barely see her own feet. Moving was difficult, sleeping nearly impossible. She woke frequently, uncomfortable and anxious, and Vincent would wake too, rubbing her back and bringing her water until she could sleep again. "You do not have to stay up with me," she said one night after waking him for the third time. "Where else would I be?" Vincent helped her sit up, stuffing pillows behind her back. "We are in this together, remember?" "I am frightened," Adelaide admitted. "About the birth. Women die in childbirth out here, Vincent. There is no doctor for miles, just Molly, who has helped with babies before but is not trained." "What if something goes wrong?" Vincent took her face in his hands, making her look at him. "Nothing is going to go wrong. You are strong, Adelaide, the strongest person I know. You survived a blizzard and built a whole new life from nothing. You can do this. And I will be right here with you no matter what. Promise?" "I promise. Nothing could make me leave your side." His certainty calmed her. Adelaide leaned into his strength, borrowing it for herself, and eventually found sleep again. The baby came on a frigid night in mid-January, nearly a year to the day after Adelaide had arrived at Vincent's homestead. She woke to pain that stole her breath, and knew immediately what was happening. Vincent rode through darkness to fetch Molly, pushing his horse hard, and returned with her in less than 3 hours. By then, Adelaide's contractions were coming fast and hard. Molly took charge immediately, boiling water and preparing the bed while Vincent held Adelaide's hand, his face pale but determined. The labor was long and difficult. Adelaide lost track of time, aware only of pain and effort and Vincent's voice in her ear, steady and encouraging, telling her she could do this. She was doing it, just a little more. Finally, as dawn light began filtering through the window, the baby came with a rush and a cry that filled the cabin. Molly worked quickly, cleaning and checking, then wrapped the infant in a soft blanket and placed the bundle in Adelaide's arms. "You have a son," Molly said, beaming. "A big, healthy boy." Adelaide looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Her son. Their son. She started crying, overwhelmed with love and relief and exhaustion. Vincent knelt beside the bed, staring at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. "Can I hold him?" Adelaide passed the baby to his father, watching as Vincent cradled the infant with exquisite care. He was crying too, tears running unashamedly down his cheeks. "Hello, little one," Vincent whispered. "I am your papa. I have been waiting to meet you." The baby opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to look directly at Vincent. Something passed between them, some fundamental connection, and Adelaide felt her heart might burst from the beauty of it. "What should we name him?" she asked. Vincent did not look away from his son. "I always liked the name William. We could call him Will. William Lawson." Adelaide smiled. "That is perfect." Molly stayed 3 days, helping Adelaide recover and teaching her how to nurse the baby. Vincent barely left their side, doing all the chores and cooking, watching his wife and son with devotion that made Molly shake her head in approval. "That man worships the ground you walk on," she told Adelaide, "and he is going to be a wonderful father. Look at him." They both watched Vincent pace the cabin with Will against his shoulder, singing a lullaby in his rough voice. The baby had been fussing, but at his father's song he quieted and settled. "I knew the moment I saw him that he was special," Adelaide said softly. "Vincent saved my life in more ways than one. He gave me back my faith when I thought it was lost forever. And you gave him a family, gave him love. That is a fair trade, honey." When Molly finally returned to town, Adelaide and Vincent settled into new rhythms. Nights were broken by Will's demands for feeding. Days were exhausting but full of small joys. The baby's first smile, the way he watched his father with fascinated eyes, the feeling of completeness that came from holding her son while her husband's arm wrapped around them both. "I cannot believe he is ours," Vincent said one evening as they sat together on the bed, Will sleeping between them. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and this will all have been a dream. Not a dream. Real life. Our life." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder. "Are you happy, Vincent?" "Happier than I ever thought possible. You know what I was thinking today while I was out mending fence? A year ago I was alone out here. No one to talk to, no one waiting for me. Now I have you and Will. I have a reason to work hard to build something lasting. I have a family." His voice caught. "You gave that back to me, Adelaide. After I lost everyone, I thought I would go through the rest of my life alone. Thank you for proving me wrong. Thank you for finding me in that blizzard, for taking a chance on a desperate stranger." Adelaide kissed his cheek. "We saved each other, I think." "I think you are right." Spring came again, bringing warmth and renewal. Will grew rapidly, a healthy baby with a good appetite and a sunny disposition. Adelaide carried him in a sling while she worked in the garden, planting even more than the year before. Vincent built a cradle from smooth pine, carving animals and birds into the headboard with painstaking detail. In May, they made the trip to town for Will's baptism. Reverend Wright performed the ceremony with the whole congregation watching, and afterward there was cake at Molly's. People came to admire the baby, and Adelaide saw pride in Vincent's face as he showed off his son. "He looks like you," someone observed, and it was true. Will had Vincent's strong features, though his eyes were lighter, more like Adelaide's. "Poor child," Vincent joked, making people laugh. But Adelaide saw the pleasure in his expression. He liked that his son resembled him, this tiny proof of their connection. Summer brought more prosperity. Vincent's cattle herd grew. He talked about buying more land, expanding the homestead. Adelaide listened to his plans, offering thoughts and suggestions, proud of how hard he worked to provide for their family. In August, she discovered she was pregnant again. Vincent's reaction was identical to the first time: joy, wonder, and immediate concern for her well-being. This time Adelaide felt more confident. She had done this before. She knew what to expect. "2 children," Vincent said that night, holding her close. "We are building something real here, Adelaide, a legacy. Everything I went through, every loss and struggle, it brought me here to you, to this." "I feel the same. When I got on that stage in Philadelphia, I thought my life was over. I was terrified and alone and hopeless. Now I have everything I ever wanted, even though it looks nothing like what I planned. Is that all right? That it looks different, it is better than all right. This is better than anything I could have planned myself. Adelaide took his hand and placed it on her belly. We are blessed, Vincent Lawson. Yes, he agreed quietly. We are. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, was born the following March in the afternoon during a gentle rain. The birth was easier than Will's had been, and within hours, Adelaide was sitting up in bed, nursing her daughter while Vincent entertained Will, who was fascinated and slightly confused by this new tiny person. Baby, Will said, pointing. He was just over a year old, starting to talk in single words. Yes, that is your sister Grace, Vincent told him. You have to be gentle with her because she is very small. Will reached out one chubby hand and touched Grace's head with surprising tenderness. The baby opened her eyes and Will gasped in delight. Baby, he is going to be a good big brother, Adelaide said, watching her children together. He learned from the best. Vincent sat on the bed beside them, one arm around Adelaide, the other steadying Will. This is perfect. All of us together. This is everything. Years passed in a rhythm of work and growth. The homestead prospered. Vincent bought adjoining land, expanding their holdings. He built a larger barn and added another room to the cabin. Will grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to ride and rope and care for animals. Grace was quick and clever, always into something, keeping Adelaide laughing and busy. Adelaide started teaching the children to read using her mother's Bible and the few other books they owned. She ordered more books from catalogs, building a small library. She filled the journal Vincent had given her that first Christmas with thoughts and memories, wanting to record their life for the children to read someday. More children came. Thomas, born when Will was 4 and Grace 2. Then the twins, Sarah and Samuel, arriving dramatically during a spring thunderstorm when Adelaide was 31 and Vincent 35. 5 children, the cabin bulging with life and noise and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent gave Adelaide a gold locket. Inside were tiny photographs of all 5 children, and on the back he had engraved, "You arrived in a blizzard with only your faith. You gave me everything." Adelaide cried when she read it, overwhelmed by memories of that desperate girl stumbling through snow, certain she was going to die. She had been so lost, her faith shaken to its core. And then Vincent had appeared like an answer to prayers she had been too angry to speak, and he had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "I love you," she told him, the words inadequate but sincere. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "That is good," Vincent said, pulling her close, "because I plan to be here every day for the rest of your life. You are stuck with me, Adelaide Lawson. There is nowhere else I would rather be stuck." They kissed while their children made exaggerated groaning noises, the older ones claiming to be disgusted by parental affection while the twins giggled. This was their life now, built from nothing, grown from faith and love and determination. It was loud and chaotic and wonderful. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Adelaide and Vincent sat on the porch in the cool evening air. The prairie stretched before them under a sky full of stars. Somewhere out there was the spot where Vincent had found her in the blizzard, where her old life had ended and this one began. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Adelaide asked. "If Richard had not died, if the stage had not crashed, if you had not gone out that day?" "All the time. But I try not to dwell on it. What matters is what did happen. You came to me through that storm, and I found you, and we built this." Vincent gestured at the homestead, the barn and corrals and fences, the cabin where their children slept safe and warm. Everything good in my life came from that terrible night. I cannot regret any of it. Neither can I." Adelaide leaned against his shoulder, feeling his arm come around her. "My mother used to say that faith is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting that we are where we need to be, even when we do not understand why. I lost that for a while, but you helped me find it again. You did the same for me. Before you, I was just going through motions. You gave me a reason to really live." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the barn, a horse whinnied. One of the children cried out briefly in sleep, then quieted. Normal sounds of their normal life, precious because it was theirs. More years passed. Will grew tall and strong, taking on more responsibility around the homestead. At 18, he started courting a girl from town, a sweet-natured blacksmith's daughter named Emma. Vincent gave his blessing with fatherly warnings about treating her properly, and Adelaide saw echoes of Vincent's young self in their serious, hard-working son. Grace was sharp as a tack, reading everything she could get her hands on. She talked about becoming a teacher, and Adelaide encouraged the dream, proud of her daughter's ambition. Thomas was quiet like his father, happiest when working with the horses. The twins were inseparable, always planning some scheme or adventure together. When Adelaide was 40, she and Vincent sat down with the children at dinner and made an announcement. The homestead had done well enough that they were sending all the children to school in town during the week, boarding with Molly. It would give them opportunities for better education and social connections. "But we want you to know," Vincent said, looking around at his family, "that this place is always your home. What we built here, we built for all of you. Someday it will be yours to carry forward." Will spoke up. "Pa, I have been thinking. I would like to stay here if that is all right, help you run things. Maybe build a house of my own on the north section if I can convince Emma to marry me." Vincent's face lit with pride and pleasure. "Son, I would like nothing better." So the pattern shifted again. The younger children went to town during the week, coming home for weekends and summers. Will stayed, working alongside his father, courting Emma with old-fashioned determination. Adelaide split her time between the homestead and trips to town to see the children, finding joy in both worlds. Emma said yes to Will's proposal in the spring, and they married that June in the same church where Adelaide and Vincent had wed 20 years before. Adelaide cried through the ceremony, remembering her own wedding day, how young and uncertain she had been. Now here was her son, standing tall and confident, promising his life to a good woman, and the circle continued. Will and Emma built a house on the north section as planned. Within a year, they had their first child, a baby girl they named Adelaide in honor of Will's mother. The first time Adelaide held her granddaughter, she was overwhelmed by the miracle of it all. From that desperate girl in the blizzard to grandmother, from nothing to this abundance. "I am getting old," she joked to Vincent that night. "You are getting better," he corrected. He was 50 now, his dark hair liberally streaked with silver, his face deeply lined from decades of sun and wind. But his eyes were the same, still that clear gray, still looking at her with love that had only deepened over time. "Every year with you is better than the last, sweet talker." "I mean it, Adelaide. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. Did not think that was possible, but it is true." "I love you more too. You are my best friend, Vincent Lawson, my partner in everything. I thank God every day that you found me in that storm. I thank God you survived until I found you, that you chose to stay, that you loved me back." Vincent pulled her into his arms, and they swayed together in the lamplight like they were dancing to music only they could hear. The years continued their march. Grace went off to teacher training and came back to teach at the Concord School. Thomas married a rancher's daughter and started his own spread on land adjacent to the homestead. The twins, inseparable as ever, went into business together, running a freight company out of Concord. All 5 children thrived, building their own lives while staying connected to the family. Adelaide and Vincent grew older together, still working the land they loved, though at a slower pace. They had help now, with Will and Thomas close by, with grandchildren who visited and played in the same spaces where their parents had grown up. The cabin had been expanded twice more, now a sprawling ranch house that bore little resemblance to the simple structure where Adelaide had first woken after Vincent saved her life. On a summer evening when Adelaide was 55 and Vincent nearly 60, they took a rare moment alone and rode out to the prairie. Vincent helped Adelaide down from her horse, and they walked together through grass that came up to their waists, green and alive and swaying in the wind. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, "about everything that happened to bring us here. All the pain we went through before we met. I used to be angry about it, especially about losing my family. But now I think maybe it was necessary. Not because God wanted us to suffer, but because suffering taught us how to appreciate this, how to value what we built together. I know what you mean. I'm not glad my father died or that Richard was killed, but those terrible things led me to you. And you, Vincent Lawson, are worth every struggle I went through. I feel the same. You were worth waiting for, worth every lonely year before you arrived." Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "If I had to do it all over again, knowing how hard it would be, I would do it exactly the same, because it led me here to you, to this life." Adelaide stood on her toes and kissed him, a soft kiss full of decades of love and trust. When she pulled back, she said, "Do you remember what you told me that first Christmas? That you had no idea how to be a father? I was terrified. You became the best father I could have imagined for our children, the best husband, the best partner. You gave me everything, Vincent. A home, a family, a purpose. You showed me that faith is not just believing in God, but believing in the possibility of good things even when everything seems lost. You restored my belief in love when I thought I had none left. And I will love you until my very last breath, and probably beyond that too." Vincent's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Adelaide Lawson, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. When I saw you lying in that snow, I thought I was just saving a stranger. I had no idea I was finding my whole future. Thank you for choosing to stay. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for every single day." They stood together on the prairie where they had made their life, surrounded by land they had worked and children they had raised and love that had sustained them through everything. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and somewhere in the distance they could hear their grandchildren laughing. This was the life Adelaide had stumbled into that frozen night so many years ago, half dead and faithless. She had arrived in a blizzard with only the remnants of her belief, certain she was meant for one future, not knowing that something infinitely better waited just ahead. Vincent had found her when she was lost in more ways than one, and together they had built something beautiful from nothing. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Adelaide leaned into Vincent's solid warmth, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong, and thought about faith. Real faith, she had learned, was not about having perfect certainty or understanding God's plan. It was about trusting that even in the darkest storms, even when you could not see the path ahead, you were being guided toward exactly where you needed to be. She had needed to be here with this man, building this life. Every hardship, every loss, every moment of despair had been leading her to this prairie, this homestead, this love, and she was grateful for all of it, even the painful parts, because they had made her who she was. They had brought her home. "Come on," Vincent said gently. "It is getting dark. We should head back before the children send out a search party. Always practical. One of us has to be." He grinned at her, and she saw in his weathered face the young man who had pulled her from the snow, who had offered her work when she had nothing, who had fallen in love with her slowly and completely. They rode back together as twilight deepened into night, their horses picking their way confidently over familiar ground. The ranch house appeared ahead, windows golden with lamplight, full of the people they loved most. Home. Adelaide had left Philadelphia with a carpetbag, her mother's Bible, and broken faith. She had arrived in Wyoming Territory during a blizzard, expecting to marry a stranger and build a practical life. Instead, she had found Vincent, and together they had built something far better than practical. They had built something true. Their story was not the one Adelaide had planned. It was better. It was real. It was a love story that had grown slowly from desperate circumstances and daily choices and mutual respect. It was a testament to the power of faith, not blind faith, but the kind that held steady even in storms, the kind that believed good things were possible even when everything seemed lost. The waiting cowboy had restored her belief in love, yes. But more than that, he had shown her that sometimes being lost is just the beginning of being found. That sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. That faith is not about certainty but about trust, about putting one foot in front of the other even when you cannot see where you are going, believing that you will end up exactly where you need to be. And Adelaide had ended up right here, on this prairie, with this man, surrounded by this family. It was everything she never knew she wanted, and it was perfect. They dismounted at the barn, took care of the horses together, then walked hand in hand to the house where their children and grandchildren waited, where dinner was ready and stories would be told and laughter would fill every corner, where life continued in all its messy, beautiful glory. Before they went inside, Vincent stopped her on the porch, pulling her close one more time. He did not say anything, just held her, and Adelaide understood. This was acknowledgement of everything they had been through, everything they had built, everything they meant to each other. Words were not always necessary after so many years together. Adelaide rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For survival, for second chances, for love that came unexpectedly and lasted forever. For the man who had found her in a blizzard and given her a reason to keep believing. The door opened, and young Adelaide, her granddaughter, poked her head out. "Grandma, Grandpa, come on. Dinner is getting cold and Mama says we cannot start without you." "Coming, sweetheart," Adelaide called. She looked up at Vincent and smiled. "Ready, always, when I am with you." They went inside together to their family, their home, their life. The blizzard that had brought them together was long past, but its gift remained. Two people who had found each other in the storm and held on, building something lasting from faith and hope and love that grew stronger every single day. Outside, stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had watched over Adelaide on that desperate night when she thought she was dying. They had seen her rescued, seen her choose love, seen her build a family and a future from nothing but determination and faith. And they would watch over this place, this family, for generations to come. The story that began with a girl arriving in a blizzard had become a legacy, and it was far from over. Will and Emma would continue it, and their children after them, each generation adding their own chapter while remembering the foundation laid by two people who found each other when both were lost. This was the true power of love, Adelaide thought, as she sat down to dinner surrounded by her family. It did not just sustain two people. It rippled outward, creating more love, more life, more hope. It transformed everything it touched. Vincent met her eyes across the table and smiled, that private smile that was just for her, and Adelaide's heart swelled with contentment. She had arrived in a blizzard with nothing but faith. She had found a cowboy who was waiting, though he had not known what he was waiting for. Together they had built a life that honored every struggle they had endured, every loss they had survived, every moment of doubt they had pushed through. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and deeply cherished. And it was more than enough. It was everything.